The story
You got it wrong. Well, it's them
of José and Prudencio. In that hidden village, there was a native-born tobacco planter who had lived there for some time, Don José Arcadio Buendia, with whom Ursula's great-grandfather established a partnership that was so lucrative that within a few years they made a fortune. Several centuries later, the great-great-grandson of the native-born planter married the great-great-granddaughter of the Aragonese. Therefore, every time that Ursula became exercised over her husband's mad ideas, she would leap back over the 300 years of fate and curse the day that Sir Francis Drake had attacked Riojacha. It was simply a way of giving herself some relief. Because actually they were joined till death by a bond that was more solid than love. A common prick of conscience. They were cousins. They had grown up together in the old village that both of their ancestors, with their work and their good habits, had transformed into one of the finest towns in the province. Although their marriage was predicted from the time they had come into the world, when they expressed their desire to be married, their own relatives tried to stop it. They were afraid that those two healthy products of two races that had interbred over the centuries would suffer the shame of breeding iguanas. There had already been a horrible precedent. An aunt of Ursula's, married to an uncle of José Arcadio Buendia, had a son who went through life wearing loose, baggy trousers, and who bled to death after having lived 42 years in the purest state of virginity. José Arcadio Buendia, with the whimsy of his 19 years, resolved the problem with a single phrase.
I don't care if I'm piglets, as long as they can talk.
So they were married, amidst a festival of fireworks and a brass band that went on for 3 days. And during the day he would take care of his fighting cocks, and she would do frame embroidery with her mother. The rumor spread that Ursula was still a virgin a year after her marriage because her husband was impotent. José Arcadio Buendia was the last one to hear the rumor.
Look at what people are going around saying, Ursula.
Let them talk. We know that it's not true.
The situation went on the same way for another 6 months, until that tragic Sunday when José Arcadio Buendia won a cockfight from Prudencio Aguilar. Furious, aroused by the blood of his bird, the loser backed away from José Arcadio Buendia so that everyone in the cockpit could hear what he was going to tell him.
Congratulations. Maybe that rooster of yours can do your wife a favor.
José Arcadio Buendia serenely picked up his rooster.
I'll be right back. You go home and get a weapon, because I'm going to kill you.
10 minutes later he returned with the notched spear that had belonged to his grandfather. At the door to the cockpit, where half the town had gathered, Prudencio Aguilar was waiting for him. There was no time to defend himself. José Arcadio Buendia's spear, thrown with the strength of a bull, and with the same good aim that which the first Aureliano Buendia had exterminated the jaguars in the region, pierced his throat. It was a fine June night, cool and with a moon, and José and Ursula were awake, frolicking in bed until dawn, indifferent to the breeze that passed through the bedroom, loaded with the weeping of Prudencio Aguilar's kin. The matter was put down as a duel of honor, but both of them were left with a twinge in their conscience. One night, when she could not sleep, Ursula went out into the courtyard to get some water, and she saw Prudencio Aguilar by the water jar. He was livid, a sad expression on his face, tried to cover the hole in his throat with a plug made of esparto grass. It did not bring on fear in her, but pity. She went back to the room and told her husband what she had seen, but he did not think much of it.
This just means that we can't stand the weight of our conscience.
2 nights later, Ursula saw Prudencio Aguilar again in the bathroom. using the esparto plug to wash the clotted blood from his throat. On another night, she saw him strolling in the rain. José Arcadio Buendia, annoyed by his wife's hallucinations, went out into the courtyard, armed with the spear, and there was the dead man with his sad expression.
You go to hell. Just as many times as you come back, I'll kill you again.
Prudencio Aguilar did not go away, nor did José Arcadio Buendia dare throw the spear. He never slept well after that. He was tormented by the immense desolation with which the dead man had looked at him through the rain. His deep nostalgia as he yearned for living people, the anxiety with which he searched through the house looking for some water with which to soak his esparto plug.
You must be suffering a great deal. You can see that he's so very lonely.
She was so moved that the next time she saw the dead man uncovering the pots on the stove, she understood what he was looking for. And from then on she placed water jugs all about the house. And one night, when he found him washing his wound in his own room, José Arcadio Buendia could no longer resist.
It's all right, Prudencio. We're going to leave this town just as far away as we can go, and we'll never come back. Go in peace.
That was how they undertook the crossing of the mountains. José Arcadio Buendia finally got what he was looking for. He connected the mechanism of the clock to a mechanical ballerina, and the toy danced uninterruptedly to the rhythm of her own music for 3 days. That discovery excited him much more than any of his other harebrained undertakings. He stopped eating. He stopped sleeping. Only the vigilance and care of Rebecca kept him from being dragged off by his imagination into a state of perpetual delirium from which he would not recover. He would spend the nights walking around the room, thinking aloud, searching for a way to apply the principles of the pendulum to ox carts, to harrows, to everything that was useful when put into motion. The fear of insomnia fatigued him so much that one dawn he could not recognize the old man with white hair and uncertain gestures who came into his bedroom, and it was Prudencio Aguilar. When he finally identified him, startled that the dead also aged, José Arcadio Buendia felt himself shaken by nostalgia.
Prudencio, you've come from a long way out.
After many years of death, the yearning for the living was so intense, the need for company so pressing, so terrifying, the neatness of that other death, which exists within death, that Prudencio Aguilar had ended up loving his worst enemy. He had spent a great deal of time looking for him. He asked the dead from Rio Hacha about him, the dead who came from the Upa Valley, those who came from the swamp, and no one could tell him, because Macondo was a town that was unknown to the dead until Melquiades arrived and marked it with a small black dot on the motley maps of death. José Arcadio Buendia conversed with Prudencio Aguilar until dawn. A few hours later, worn out by the vigil, he went into Aureliano's workshop.
What day is today?
Tuesday.
I was thinking the same thing, but suddenly I realized that it's still Monday, like yesterday. Look at the sky, look at the walls, look at the begonias. Today it's Monday too.
Used to his manias, Aureliano paid no attention to it. And on the next day, Wednesday, José Arcadio Buendia went back to the workshop.
This is a disaster. Look at the air, listen to the buzzing of the sun. The same as yesterday and the day before. Today is Monday too.
That night, Pietro Crespi found him on the porch, weeping for Prudencio Aguilar, for Melquiades, for Rebecca's parents, for his mother and father, for all those he could not remember and who were now alone in death. He gave him a mechanical bear that walked on its hind legs on a tightrope, but he could not distract him from explained to him a few days before about the possibility of building a pendulum machine that would help men to fly. And he answered that it was impossible because a pendulum could lift anything into the air, but it could not lift itself. On Thursday, he appeared in the workshop again with a painful look of ploughed ground. He almost sobbed.
The time machine is broken, and Ursula and Amaranta are so far away.
Aureliano scolded him like a child, and he adopted a contrite air. He spent 6 hours examining things, trying to find a difference from their appearance on the previous day, in the hope of discovering in them some change that would reveal the passage of time. He spent the whole night in bed with his eyes open, calling to Prudencio Aguilar, to Melquiades, to all the dead, so that they would share his distress, but no one came. On Friday, before anyone arose, he watched the appearance of nature again, until he did not have the slightest doubt that it was Monday. And then he grabbed the bar from a door, and with the savage violence of his uncommon strength, he smashed the dusty equipment in the alchemy laboratory, the daguerreotype room, the silver workshop, shouting like a man possessed in some high-sounding and fluent but completely incomprehensible language. He was about to finish off the rest of the house when Aureliano asked the neighbors for help. 10 men were needed to get him down, 14 to tie him up, 20 to drag him to the chestnut tree in the courtyard where they left him tied up, barking a strange language and giving off a green froth at the mouth. And when Ursula and Maranta returned, he was still tied to the trunk of the chestnut tree by his hands and feet, soaked with rain and in a state of total innocence. They spoke to him, and he looked at them without recognizing them, saying things they did not understand. Ursula untied his wrists and ankles, lacerated by the pressure of the rope, and left him tied only by the waist. And later on, they built him a shelter of palm brandies to protect him from the sun and the rain. A special messenger brought a sealed envelope to the house with a sheet of paper inside, bearing the colonel's delicate hand. Take good care of Papa, because he's going to die. Ursula became alarmed.
If Aureliano says so, it's because Aureliano knows.
And she had them help her take José Arcadio Buendia to his bedroom. Not only was he as heavy as ever, but during his prolonged stay under the chestnut tree, he had developed the faculty of being able to increase his weight at will, to such a degree that 7 men were unable to lift him, and they had to drag him to the bed. A smell of tender mushrooms, of wood flower fungus, of old and concentrated outdoors impregnated the air of the bedroom, as it was breathed by the colossal old man, weather-beaten by the sun and the rain. The next morning, he was not in his bed. In spite of his undiminished strength, José Arcadio Buendia was in no condition to resist. It was all the same to him. If he went back to the chestnut tree, it was not because he wanted to, but because of a habit of his body. Ursula took care of him, fed him, brought him news of Aureliano, but actually the only person with whom he was able to have contact for a long time was Prudencio Aguilar. Almost pulverized at the time by the decrepitude of death, Prudencio Aguilar would come twice a day to chat with him. They talked about fighting cocks, and they promised each other to set up a breeding farm for magnificent birds, not so much to enjoy their victories, which they would not need them, as to have something to do on the tedious Sundays of death. It was Prudencio Aguilar who cleaned him, fed him, and brought him splendid news of an unknown person called Aureliano, who was a colonel in the war. When he was alone, José Arcadio Buendia consoled himself with the dream of the infinite rooms. He dreamed that he was getting out of bed, opening the door, and going into an identical room with the same bed, with a wrought iron head, the same wicker chair, and the same small picture of the Virgin of Help on the back wall. And from that room he would go into another that was just the same, the door of which would open into another that was just the same, the door of which that would open into another one just the same, and then into another exactly alike, and so on. He liked to go from room to room, as in a gallery of parallel mirrors, until Prudencio Aguilar would touch him on the shoulder. And then he would go back from room to room, walking in reverse, going back over his trail, and he would find Prudencio Aguilar in the room of reality. But one night, 2 weeks after they took him to his bed, Prudencio Aguilar touched his shoulder in an intermediate room, and he stayed there forever, thinking that it was the real room. On the following morning, Ursula was bringing him his breakfast when she saw a man coming along the hall. He was short and stocky, with a black suit on, and a hat that was also black, enormous, pulled down to his taciturn eyes.
Good Lord! I could have sworn it was Narrator's.
It was Catuari, Visitacion's brother, who had left the house fleeing from the insomnia plague, and of whom there had never been any news. Visitacion asked him why he had come back, and he answered her in their solemn tongue.
I have come for the expertise of the king.
And they went into José Arcadio Buendia's room, shook him as hard as they could, shouted in his ear, put a mirror in front of his nostrils, but they could not awaken him. A short time later, when the carpenter was taking measurements for the coffin, through the window they saw a light rain of tiny yellow flowers fall. They fell on the town all through the night in a silent storm, and they covered the roofs and blocked the doors and smothered the animals who slept outdoors. So many flowers fell from the sky that in the morning the streets were carpeted with a compact cushion, and they had to clear them away with shovels and rakes so that the funeral procession could pass by.